Metropolis Lux Obscura is getting a lot of attention for its Nintendo.com listing and its eShop listing. People see the game and are like, oh my god, a mature rated game coming out on a Nintendo platform. Now, those of us who have followed Nintendo for a long time know that mature themed games on Nintendo platforms isn't anything new. It's been happening for a very long time now. But the Switch is bringing in people who perhaps have never owned a Nintendo system or haven't owned one in a long time, and they know that Nintendo has a very family-friendly image. So they see something like this game and are like, wow, I'm so shocked Nintendo approved this. Now, while Nintendo themselves might not make mature-themed content, they certainly have nothing against developers and publishers that want to put out that mature-themed content on their platform. Another reason this game's getting a lot of attention is because the eShop and Nintendo.com listings have some screenshots, and in a few of those screens there are some scantily clad women, and they are showing off their private bits, although they're covered by black censor bars. That's only the case for these listings. The full game shows everything uncensored, but people are seeing these listings and saying, oh my goodness, that's so scandalous, I can't believe Nintendo's showing something like this. I mean, I don't have to tell you that anytime there's something sexual or sexually suggestive, it makes people raise their eyebrows and people start talking about it and word spreads, especially on the internet. I don't know if you're aware, but pornography is kind of big on the internet. So when content like this comes up, people take notice. So I think what people aren't realizing is this is a match 3 game. The story's told through like a comic book / graphic novel style, but the gameplay, the stuff you actually really play, is a match 3 game. So I don't know how excited people would be about it if they knew that right off the bat. I have nothing against match 3 games at all. I actually really like that genre, but I just think people are seeing like the graphic novel screens and the nudity and the censored stuff and are like, oh, this game's going to be awesome. But if they read on more and saw that there's a match 3 game in here that's the bulk of the gameplay, they'd be like, this isn't going to be for me. Now, the developers of this game aren't idiots. They're trumpeting this content because they know it will get people to pay attention. If the developers were like, hey, this is a match 3 game right off the bat, they'd lose some eyes. If they put the sex and the violence and stuff up front, they know they're going to get more people to check out the game, and some people might buy it just based on seeing that stuff and not realize what they're getting into. If you go on to read more of the eShop listing, you see bullet points, and bullet points are supposed to be, details about gameplay mechanics and reasons to draw people in. And the developers here have chosen bullet points like gorgeous, sexy girls, 12 mental disorders and bad habits to unlock, obscenity and sexism. Like, I get what they're trying to do. They want to push the edgy content and be like, look, we're a real edgy game. You want to check this out. You won't believe what's in this game. And that's going to work. There are going to be some people to buy it because of that stuff. But what we need to do is talk about how the game actually plays, talk about if the game is fun. All that content I have no problem with. I have no issue with mature themed games at all. It's just, those aren't reasons for me to buy a game. I play a game or purchase a game and play it because I'm expecting a fun time, something to grab me, something, some sort of gameplay hook or something like that. And Metropolis Lux Obscura is just a very basic match 3 experience, and to tell you the truth, the other content that's in there just isn't done very well at all. Metropolis Lux Obscura's story has you following this guy who gets out of jail, and he was in jail for a crime he didn't commit, so he's been framed, and when he gets out, he's trying to find out who framed him, and of course the only way to do that is to slip back into old habits and get back with gangs and do illegal activities and stuff like that. So you're going around fighting a lot of guys and killing a lot of guys, and you're punching and kicking a lot of dogs too. I have to point that out. My playthrough, I had 3 instances, I think, where I had to take out over dogs specifically, and I'm like, all right, I think I've had enough animal abuse for one game. But you also visit all sorts of seedy locations like mafia boss hideouts and dark alleyways and strip clubs and stuff like that. And sprinkled throughout, there's a whole bunch of cursing, there's a whole bunch of violence and blood. There's obviously nudity when you're at the strip club. You end up having sex with a woman, in my storyline anyway. So, like, they're really throwing everything in there to get that mature rating. And unfortunately, that's what it feels like. It feels like they just threw it in there. The story just is, I think at best, it's paint by numbers. It's just not all that entertaining. It feels like a whole bunch of tropes and cliches thrown together, but you've seen everything done better in a whole bunch of different stories, be it comic books or TV shows or movies. So it just, I appreciate there being a story to motivate you to continue, but the story that's here isn't really all that interesting. As you experience the story, you start to realize that all this nudity and sex and violence is here just for shock value. It adds nothing to the story. It's really not handled well at all. It's very heavy-handed, actually. And at its best, it's very by the numbers. I feel like the developers were like, what makes a mature game? Nudity, sex, violence, and cursing. So all that has to be in our game, and that's why it's here. It's the only reason. Like I said, even with the eShop listing that lists gorgeous, sexy girls and stuff like that, I think they're very upfront about it because they know there are people who are going to buy the game because they're like, I want to see gorgeous, sexy girls. So if that's your only motivation, then you're going to get your money's worth out of the game because that content is there. But if you're looking for it to be more meaningful or help play a part in a story that actually is worth experiencing, I didn't get it from this game. Maybe you will. The best thing I can liken this whole experience to is actually something that happened in my own life a bazillion years ago. So when I was 16, I hadn't ever been to the movie theater to see an R-rated movie. I'd seen some R-rated movies on TV, but I was a good kid, so I was like, I'm not 17. I shouldn't be seeing an R-rated movie. And then this movie called Wild Things came along, and my friend was like, we have to go see Wild Things in the theater. We have to. And I was like, but I'm 16. They're not going to let me in. And he's like, you have a beard. You look like you're 30. You'll get in no problem. And I was like, I don't know. I should ask my parents. And he's like, no, don't ask your parents. Now, my parents weren't strict. They probably would have said, go ahead. But for some reason, I didn't ask them. So I went to the movie, and we got in. We weren't carded or anything. So that was my first R-rated movie in the theater. And if you don't know anything about Wild Things, it's full of lots of nudity and sex. And that was the whole reason you saw the movie, basically. Now, back when I was 16 and I saw that, I was like, Wild Things is the greatest movie I've ever seen in my life. Well, you know, you get older and you're like, boy, that movie sure does suck. So, I don't know, maybe that's the goal of Metropolis Lux Obscura. It's looking for those on the cusp kids, teens, into adults that are looking for that kind of content. But then again, when I was young, we didn't, like, the internet wasn't like it is now, and we, you know, sometimes movies were where you went to see that kind of content. Trying to say this as tastefully as I can, but nowadays with the internet, you can pretty much see whatever you want. So I don't know, to get it out of a game, I guess, is just kind of silly, but I really think that's the motivation of the developers here. There were a couple other things that irked me about the story. Now, it's presented, as I said, graphic novel or comic book or something like that, and I do like the visual, the motion comic aspects to it, and I really do like the art style, too, to tell you the truth. I really enjoyed the art style. But there's a couple problems. So some or a lot of the scenes have dialogue boxes, and those scenes are also fully voiced. I think every scene is fully voiced, to tell you the truth. And the problem is the voice actors will say things that aren't written in the boxes. Sometimes they'll just leave out a couple words. Sometimes they'll change words completely. Sometimes you'll read a character's name and then the voice actor won't even say that name. And I don't understand why there's so many instances like this. It was really annoying, to tell you the truth. And then on top of that, the voice actors, I will say, range from barely adequate to terrible. And I don't think I'm too picky with voice acting because I watch a good amount of anime, and if there's a dub, I'll watch the dub. And I know a lot of people hate anime dubs, and I get knocked a lot for watching anime dubs, but I can tolerate them. I find them usually to be okay. So I guess take that bit of information and know that I'm saying the voice acting in this game is very bad, so it's going to be horrendous. The main character is the best of the whole bunch, I think, and he does, I don't want to say good, he does a job. It's not good, it's not bad, but he accomplished his job. Now the other people, pretty much everybody else in the whole cast, is painful. And the problem here is the artwork is so expressive, and again, I find it very well done. And there's some really strong emotion coming from the faces of the characters. And then you get that mixed with like very bland line readings, or just line readings that have completely different emotions from what the faces of the characters are, and it absolutely ruined it for me. I think you can turn off the voice acting, But it's like one of those car crash things. I couldn't look away. But yeah, I recommend if you're very critical of voice acting, especially in games or anime or anything like that, you're really not gonna like what you find here. Let's finally get to the gameplay of Metropolis Lux Obscura, which I've said is a match 3 game. You have an enemy, you have yourself, both of you have a certain amount of hit points, and you match 3 icons to do damage to them. There's like taser icons and smoke grenade icons or something like that, and gun icons and fist icons and boot icons, and then there's health packs and like a rage meter icon as well. You match 3, 4, or 5 in your turn, and they either deal damage if it's an attack or give you health if it's a med kit and stuff like that. And enemies will have counters that let you know when they're going to attack. So you might get 3 matches in a row, and then they're going to attack. So you do 3 moves, and then they attack. And some people, it's hit for hit. And some battles will have multiple layers to them, so you won't just be going through one enemy. You'll defeat one bad guy, and then another one will come out, and they have more health, and they attack in 2 turns instead of 4 like the last guy. So that aspect actually is enjoyable once the battles move on from one-on-one, the lower guys in the beginning of the game, because once you get to multi-layered fights, you have to do a better job at finding the larger matches, and also making sure you match up health packs to give yourself more health and stuff like that. So there's some strategy, or the strategy and management aspects really get played up later on in the game, and I do find that enjoyable. That was a nice bit of the experience for me. Battles can go really for or against you depending on if you find or you match these like rage icons. For every 3, 4, or 5 that you match, this rage meter builds, and it makes all your attacks stronger. So your kicks and punches will do more damage. And then on top of that, when you finish a level, you get certain like buffs and stuff that you get to choose from. So you could make brass knuckles do more damage, or you could make there's police emblems that if you match 3, 4, or 5 of those, you get hurt. So there's something that'll let you potentially get rid of some of those police badges, and you get one of these at the end of each match 3 mission that you complete, and you build them up and level them up. So, as you go through the game, you get stronger and you get more chances to save yourself in bad situations, stuff like that. So that is fun. You always have 4 to pick from, so it's, they're randomly given to you. So you just have to keep track on the menu of what you've gotten and what you're upgrading and stuff like that to try and build a fleshed out character for the harder battles later on. It's a very straightforward match 3, and that's not a bad thing, but there's nothing here that really, wows you or knocks your socks off or even is something new or different just for the sake of being new or different. It's just a very straightforward match 3, and I can enjoy that, but there's a few things I would have liked to have seen to give the experience a little more punch in the gameplay. And I don't know if you are going to understand where I'm coming from here, because this might just be a weird quirk of mine, but everything from the movement of your pieces on the match 3 board to the sound effects that are used, I think can really enhance the experience. It can make it more punchy and make it feel more alive and maybe exciting. It's kind of like in Zelda games when you go to swing a sword and there's that second when Link swings his sword before they connect with the sword, that little pause, and that just heightens the connection, the moment that you hit the enemy. It just, I don't know, it feels better to me. So I feel like here they could have done more to enhance when you actually get the matches and the sound effects that go on with them, and make it a little more flashy or something like that, just to give it more of a feeling of impact, because I feel overall, the whole the bells and whistles aspect of the gameplay just isn't there. I feel like it's a very quiet and very bland experience. And match 3, again, I always find enjoyable, and I just wish they did a little bit more to spruce it up, to give it a little more character. I also have an issue with the controls. The controls work fine, but they made a weird decision. So whether you're using the joystick or the directional pad, depending on what you're using to play, match 3s are on a grid. So when I'm using a directional pad specifically, I would think that one tap on the directional pad would move me one space in the direction that I want to go. So I grab my piece and hit left once. I wanted to go 1 block to the left. But that's not how it works here. You grab your piece, and if you tap left, your icon just moves a very little bit. So you have to like drag it across the whole board to put it where you want. I don't know why they wouldn't just have it snap in place for each movement. Like, you're never going to place it somewhere that's not in a spot on the checkerboard or on the match 3 board, because that's where your pieces go. You never plop something down in between. So I don't get why they did that. And also, I feel like they didn't really test it a lot, because you can grab a piece and like drag it outside of the board. Like, you can just drag it all around the whole screen, and that serves no purpose. It doesn't do anything. It's not an Easter egg. It's not a special way to get more damage. You can just make the piece disappear. Now, obviously, it doesn't disappear in the sense that it just goes away forever, but it disappears off the screen, and then you have to drag it back. I was thinking maybe if you went to the edge of the board, it would loop around to come back to the other side, but it did not. It just floated around. So I don't know why they did that. I feel like just with a couple tweaks, the control scheme would have made a lot more sense. I also feel I have to mention that I did have the game just stop working for one occasion throughout my experience. I did a match, and I had 2 more matches to make, and when I made one match, my icon just disappeared. It was completely gone. There was nothing there. I couldn't get it to come back. I could still pause the game, and I can go into the menu and stuff like that, but it never came back. I had to restart my save file and just pick up that fight all over again, and it was a fight that was actually going pretty well. I don't know what caused it. It's a glitch, obviously, that needs to be fixed, and hopefully for those that pick up that game, it's not a glitch that comes up often, but one playthrough of the first story path that I chose took, I want to say, an hour at most. So it's not going to be a long experience overall, even if you're going through all the stories, because I imagine when you whittle down the options on the map of where you're going to go, because there's different places you can visit at different times, and depending on where you go, you'll get different things that happen in the story. It's not going to be a long experience, so I feel like one glitch that makes the game unplayable in that short of a time span is a bit worrisome. But like I said, maybe it was just completely freak, and it won't happen to a lot of players, but I felt like I had to tell you. It doesn't bring me any joy to say that Metropolis Lux Obscura is, I'll say, serviceable at best. That sounds horrible, but it's how I feel. And at least I can say the best part of the game for me was the match 3 stuff, and that is your main gameplay mechanic. What you do in the game is a pretty decent split between reading, watching story, and playing the match 3 stuff. So at least the moments where you're actually playing the game are fine. I don't want to say they're good. I've played worse match 3 games before, so I can say that. But yeah, I wouldn't be like, oh, this match 3 is really cool because you've got this, that, and the other thing. It's very hard for me to recommend it. The problem here is I love the idea. I love all the pieces and parts, just not how they're presented in this game at all. Like the idea of a dark and gritty, mature story told in this graphic novel style or motion comic style, mixed in with like story progression and branching paths and handling battle mechanics through match 3. I love all that stuff. I think it could come together to be something really awesome. I know there's been match 3 games that have RPG elements and stories and stuff like that before, but I don't feel it's ever been handled in this kind of way. It's just unfortunate that the team that put it together just couldn't... They couldn't make it work, I feel like. The story just didn't do it for me. The mature rated content is very obviously thrown in there just to get people's attention and not to add anything to the gameplay experience at all. I really do think there could be something that could work here, or at least an idea of something that could work here, but it did not come together in Metropolis Lux Obscura. So that's my experience. I always say, don't, you can take what I say and, decide what you're going to do as far as a purchase or play or anything like that, but don't take my word as gospel. Maybe you'll find some stuff here that you absolutely enjoy. So I'm just telling you about my experience, and unfortunately, it wasn't a very good one. Hey guys, RMC here from Go Nintendo. If you like what you saw in the video, why don't you give us a thumbs up and maybe even subscribe? We'd love to have you. If you want to see what else we're up to, you can check out GoNintendo.com for 24-hour Nintendo news. You can visit us on Facebook at Facebook.com/GoNintendo. You can check us out on Twitter at Twitter.com/GoNintendoTweet. And we're even over on Instagram at Instagram.com/GoNintendo. I put all the links in the description just to make it easier for you guys to follow. Thanks a lot.